Hi, Paul.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm
Fine,
ready to
thank you.
go.
Good. Karen, is that you?
Yeah?
I'm just gonna put your name on your little label here, okay?
Yeah?
Great. I'm so glad you're with us on your phone.
Well, I'm very interested in how we're going to pay for all this. I really would like the library, but too many objections.
Well, it's very good to listen to their proposals and see what they think after they can understand it better.
Well, I hope so. I hope they understand it better than I do. We still have to borrow some money on top of everything else.
Yep. And everybody has to make their own decisions. So thank you for being here.
So Becky, you're just letting people enter as they come on now, right?
I saw the list and I let them all in, yeah.
Okay.
And when there's a whole bunch, I can let them all in as a group.
Okay.
But I am watching.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So are you able now to set everyone to mute?
They all were,
Doesn't appear that they are.
okay, so I need to give you that power. Right now, I only have mute all upon entry. Okay. All right, Paul, I'm gonna, before much else happens, I'm gonna make you the host.
Okay.
And you can, that's what we were, I'm sorry, I was a minute late.
Who am I talking to? Or
This is Becky. You were talking to
yeah,
Becky. Karen.
and who are you giving that over to?
Paul Lyons.
Oh, okay.
He's
Thank
gonna
you.
host the meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Okay.
then I rely on you to make me a co-host in case anything happens.
Yes, let me do that right off the bat. And then I'm going to mute everybody to start off. Okay, so you're a co-host now, Becky.
Okay.
So let me see now if I mute. How does this work?
So
Not sure I know how.
Okay, down at the bottom.
Yeah.
There in the middle at the there over to the right, there are 3: invite, mute all, or more. That should be at the bottom of your screen.
Got it. All right. And then I guess I have to invite you to unmute yourself. So you can do that now. There you go.
Okay, so you muted me and unmuted me. Okay, right?
Well, I invited you to unmute yourself. Yes, I think that's the way I have to do it when
Right.
I want someone to speak.
Okay, but did you mute me to begin with?
I muted everybody.
Excellent. So that's all working.
I think so. We'll see as people join, whether that still applies to everybody.
I better let Jim in.
Yeah.
And George.
And Susie.
Yeah.
Can you hear me well enough, by the way?
Very clearly.
Okay, good. I tried to work on the lighting in my space here, so I don't look so bizarre.
The lighting is, yeah, it's very painteresque. Yeah,
Yeah, I moved up to a little office space upstairs, so the better place for me to do this from.
nice. Okay. I did something strange to my list. It disappears. I guess we don't have a quorum of the FinCom yet.
Yeah, Jim will be starting off since, calling his meeting to order since it's officially a FinCom meeting tonight.
Yeah, oh, Jim's raising his hand. There's 4 now. They have a quorum now.
Okay, and Jim, you should be able to unmute yourself. Yeah, you did. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we do have a quorum now. We have 4 out of 7. I think we're expecting 7 out of 7. But we do have a quorum.
Good. So I think you're just waiting on Melody.
And I think Jim. Oh, this Jim. Yeah,
Yeah,
just,
Jim
yeah, we're
just-
just waiting on Melody.
Yep, Jim's here.
And it is 6 o'clock. So we could call a meeting to order. I know we've got 90 minutes. And then you've got your other session regarding the warrants. So I'm going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. And just welcome all our fellow Shutesburyans to the Finance Committee Fiscal Year 23 Budget Review. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight. Before getting going, I'd like to take a quick brief minute just to introduce everybody. If that's, I don't know how best to do that, Paul and Becky, with this medium.
It's the same. You can just call their names and have them respond.
Okay, what I can do that.
Well, I would have to unmute them all if you want them to speak.
Oh,
Is that what you would like, Jim?
Yeah, I think that might be the easiest for you, Paul, is to unmute them all. And I think, yeah, we've got 6 still. I think we're still missing Melody.
I haven't seen her come in.
So as people become unmuted, maybe we can start introducing.
With so many people joining, my screen bounces around so much that, okay, there's Bob. And Susie, so I'm asking FinCom members to unmute themselves so that they're able to speak when the time comes.
Okay, did you get 6 of us?
I have not seen Melody yet.
Yeah, well,
6. You've got AJ, Susie, Bob, Jim Hemingway, Jim Walton.
Okay,
There's
AJ, I don't think there's
and George
AJ.
is here. George, you haven't unmuted yet. Because, Paul, did you unmute George?
I thought I did, but it doesn't look like it. worked.
Well,
Try again, George.
Yep, I'm good. I
All
actually
right.
turned it off and on. I didn't realize once you turn it off, it's off again for good.
Oh, be careful.
Okay.
So that was my fault.
Maybe what I'll suggest is we just go in order the way we vote.
Sure.
Uh,
So I'm George Arvanitis, 15 Pelham Hill Road, Shutesbury.
I'm Bob Groves, 424 Pelham Hill Road, Shutesbury.
Jim Hemingway, 318 Locks Pond Road, Shutesbury.
Hi, AJ Cashew, 35 Hidden Meadow Road.
Suzie Mosier, 360 Cooleyville Road.
And Jim Walton, 75 Town Farm Road. Just a brief couple of comments. Expectations for tonight are to review the proposed budget.
Melody's
Uh,
here.
Melody, introduce yourself.
Hold on a minute.
Okay, first things
Yeah.
first.
I gotta find her. Okay, Melody, you can unmute yourself and then introduce yourself.
Hi, Melody Chartier, Finance Committee.
All right. So as I was starting, our expectations for tonight are to review the proposed budget, that which will be presented at Saturdays, this coming Saturday's annual town meeting, and provide enough info for everyone to better understand the budget for this coming year. Also, we want to stimulate the environment here to create the questions and then the answers for to allow us all to get to a higher level. The ultimate objective is we all come away from this 90 minutes with the information we all need or expect so as to be prepared for Saturday's annual town meeting. So with that, I guess welcome to everybody in Shutesbury. Thanks for taking the time. And I'm grateful, I think, as the rest of the FinCom is grateful for having Paul moderate this evening's session. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Paul for this next go over the process.
Okay, thank you, Jim. You say you're grateful now, but the evening's young still, so we'll see how it goes. So I also want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. I hope you find this public information session very useful. This is what we have planned and how we will be proceeding. In a moment, I will turn things back over to Jim, who will provide us with the overview of the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. If you haven't seen the budget documents yet, remember that they're all available from a link right on the homepage of the town website. So Becky will be able to share documents as appropriate tonight, but if you want to be able to look on your own, then you can actually open them up right on your screen if you want from the town website. After the Jim's FinCom presentation, we'll open things up for questions. I will start with those that were submitted by email as we had requested prior to this meeting. We got some good questions. New questions, obviously, I think as Jim goes through his presentation, you'll think of things you would like answers to. Please submit those via the chat function. Should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Send them, I think, hopefully you can only send them to me. If not, if you have the option to send them to everybody, please do not do that. It can get very confusing, especially if I'm trying to communicate back and forth with the questioner to clarify what they're trying to ask. It's best if that's not going to everybody. So please send your chat questions just to me. I will sort through them and do my best to convey the meaning of it back to the Finance Committee. If possible, when you submit your question, please make note of whether it's in regards to the revenue, the expenses, or the capital improvement part of the proposed budget. Those are the three documents that are posted on the website: revenue, expenses, and capital improvement. So it would be helpful if we knew going into your question which of those you're referring to. We hope to wrap up this part of the evening by about 7:30 or so that we'll have time for the second part of the public information session. That is a review and explanation of the other articles that are in this year's warrant. For both segments of this evening's program, I want you to please keep in mind that this is meant to be a public information session. That is, it's your opportunity to hear from or ask questions of the Finance Committee and other town officials to gain a better understanding of the warrant articles, or, in this first case, the budget that you'll be voting on at annual town meeting on Saturday. We want voters to be able to make as informed votes and decisions as possible at the town meeting. So that's the intent of tonight. This is not the time or place to debate or express your opinions about the budget or the other articles. That opportunity comes on Saturday at the annual town meeting, when you'll also have a much larger audience to present your ideas and opinions to. So again, if you haven't already emailed your questions, please do so tonight via the chat function. As I said, I'll do my best to read, sort through, and then present your questions. This takes some sustained concentration and focus on my part, and those, to be honest, are qualities that may present an increasing challenge for me as we go through the evening. So please be patient with me if I don't get your question asked exactly how you intended. You can always follow up in that case with another chat to me, and I will clarify. So my intent here is to be as fair and even-handed as possible. To that point, I will not allow any questions that are critical of individuals or are otherwise clearly inappropriate. We have had some of those types of questions asked in the past, and I have not asked them. So please keep that in mind. You're also welcome to submit more than one question this evening, but unless you have a logical follow-up to your initial question, I will give others a chance to have their questions answered before I go back to your additional ones. Again, I believe that everybody is automatically muted. I don't think you can unmute yourself, but if by chance you can, I ask that you stay muted so that we can have as few confusing moments with other people talking as possible. So that's what we have in store. At this point, I will turn it back over to Jim to give an overview of the fiscal 23 budget. Jim.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I'll start. I think all the documents or the information we'll be presenting, I think, Becky, you have, and you'll be putting up. So for this section of the evening, we'll work with that 4-page budget report.
Okay.
So if we can go to page 1 of the, there we go, of the budget report, and that's the top half of it. Let's see. Okay. Becky, on your left there, can you close that stuff over on the left, or does that need to stay? Those pages, do you need the?
You can't see the whole thing?
Yeah, we can see this whole thing. I'm just thinking it might, if it's easier for you, we can do it this way.
I can.
I'm just
What
thinking
would
if you
you
didn't
like?
have that stuff on the left, we'd have more room and people might be able to see the information better. But I think
Okay.
this looks okay.
The arrow at the top left, Becky.
Yeah, that view.
Who's top left? Mine is buried under something.
Yeah, the view. Yeah, all the way over to the left on the, yeah, that one there.
So you don't want the,
Sidebar. It's the first
The
one.
top
Becky.
one, top one. Okay. Are you okay, Becky, with that?
sure, until you start turning pages, I might go back.
Uh-oh, okay. All right, okay. Fiscal year 23 budget report. First this is what we're proposing for this year, a $6.7 million budget, which would turn out to be about a 1.1% increase over last year, which I think was about flat. Last year was flat versus the prior year, and the prior year before that was a very small, less than a 0.5% increase. So this would be the third year in a row we've seen very small, or if any, changes in budget in the budget, which I think is probably more challenging this year, as we all know that we've seen inflation starting to move in a higher direction, a much higher direction. Revenue. How are we going to support this $6.7 million? We've got residential taxes is by far the biggest. That's all of us here in this meeting, I think tonight, are contributing to these residential taxes, and that's $5.117 million. The other taxes, which are commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes, those are about $306,000. There's an overlay, an adjustment, and this is tax abatements and other small items that can affect the revenue. That's a minus $40,000. Local receipts, such as excise taxes, court fees, motor vehicles, things of that type. That's $266,000 of income. Payment in lieu of taxes. So, for example, the DCR, which is a lot of that is the Quabbin, the Amherst Water, etc. That's $336,000, and very similar to last year, as far from a revenue perspective. Estimated net state aid is $695,000. That's a small reduction, about a 0.5% reduction from what we saw last year. So those are the revenue sources that contribute to the $6.7 million. I guess I didn't talk to the $20,000 for the loan. We do have loan payments that we make that you'll see on the expense side of our budget, but these are picked up by a grant of $20,000. So we do have $20,000 in debt, but that's paid for by a grant, which was reflected by this $20,000 here. Okay, Becky, if you could scroll down to the pie chart. Okay, so it doesn't show. If you could squeeze a little bit farther down. You can't go farther down. Because you look, there we go, because that's, we want to be able to see what the big piece of the pie is. The big piece of the pie is, of course, what we're all contributing to, and that's our residential taxes, and that's about 76% of the overall revenue. The other tax part, which is the commercial, industrial, personal, that's about 5%. So those are the two tax sources. The big tax sources are about 80%, over 80% of the revenues. And then the other pieces, state aid contributes 10% of the revenue. Payment in lieu of taxes contributes 5%. The local receipts contributes 4%. And then that betterment loan takes away a small 0.3%. One comment on this, the residential taxes, if we were to compare this, the residential and looking at that versus the commercial, industrial, and personal taxes is 76% versus 5%. 94% of our taxes are residential versus the average Massachusetts town is about 82%. And that's just a reflection of the type of town we all chose to live in. This is a town we don't want a lot of commercial activity. We don't want a lot of industrial activity. And as a result, residents all of us are picking up more of the tax bill. Okay, I think we can go to page 2. Okay, so we just looked at the income or the revenues pie, and that was a $6.7 million pie. Now this is what it's going towards paying for. So this is the budget or the expenses, which are exactly the same, also 6.7 million. Okay, and once again, we can't see that really, really big piece of pie and what that's all about. There we go. Education, of course, is the big factor with our budget, and that's 59% of our budget. And if we start from the left side, there's the highway public works, which is 8%. Then there's human services and miscellaneous, about 1%. There's retirement, unemployment, OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. That's 5%. Insurance and bonds, 1%. Health insurance is 8%. Culture recreation, 1.5%. General government is 9%. Debt service, most of that is really stabilization. And then there's the 20,000 that I talked about earlier that goes to pay for that a project that we have a grant for. And then we have fire and police, which is 6.2%. Okay, so we've got, this is what makes up our expense side, 6.7 million, and broken down by percentages. Now, if we scroll down, as we are required, we have a balanced budget, or we're proposing a balanced budget for the fiscal year 23. And this explains the differences. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at a 1.1% increase versus last year's budget. And so that means $72,000. So what we proposed last year and what was voted on and approved versus this year's proposed, this is a $72,000 increase. And now we're going through down this section here, the section 1 talks about the biggest contributors, the most significant contributors to that increase. And a big one here is rubbish and recycling hauling. We can get into detail on any of these, of course, later during the questions and answers. But I'm not going to go into detail right now on these. Town employees, the salary increases of $47,000. Of that, 17 is COLA, or cost of living adjustments. And then there's $30,000 of market alignments. And that means we're in a competitive environment, as any of us, I guess, working would be. We're in competitive environment with other towns, and we have some really amazing talent here that we are looking to hang on to, and that we have to compete to maintain at some point. So it's important for us to be competitive with the towns around us, and that's what this $30,000 is about. And I think that came through the personnel board's proposed recommendations and analysis. Elementary school, a $13,000 increase. Retirement county, $13,000 increase. And now we're starting to get smaller. $9,000 for the assessor's expenses. All other items that go up, that went up, equate to about $19,000. Okay, and then the last two items are actually a significant decreases. So there's the regional school. We did reach a 100% statutory this year. So that will translate to about a $64,000 decrease for Shutesbury. And that's reflected in this budget. And then the last item, we've taken out what we've had in here for about the last, I guess, 10 years or so, 10 or 11 years. which has been $25,000 per year for the annual library building fund. We've taken that out because we do have a project for a new library. So if we did have a library, we wouldn't be needing to continue to contribute to a library fund. Okay, so that's section 1. Okay, if we could go down to, I guess that would be page 3. And that's section 2. Notable projected revenue increases and decreases. So this is the net tax levy used in fiscal year 23 budget is $104,000, or about 2%. The tax levy available is 2.5%, which would have been $145,000. So less the levy to fund the budget is adds 41,000, adds 41,000 to the excess levy capacity. So that might not equate with everybody. If anyone has some questions, then let's make sure we dig into that deeper in the question and answer period. New growth is 10,000. Section 3 is the cash reserves. These are our beginning balances. So this is Shutesbury's cash reserves at the beginning. Free cash as of July of last year was $1,174,000. Capital stabilization is now $371,000. And stabilization is $456,000. So for a total just over $2 million in cash reserves. So for a town of our size and a town with our size budget, this is getting to be a really significant number, a big number. These cash reserves. One other comment I'll make here as we talk about cash is a debt. We basically don't really have any debt other than primarily debt that we're getting payment for through a grant. So from a overall financial position, very good cash position, and basically no debt, essentially no debt. Now, section number 4, these are all items that show up on warrants for Saturday's meeting. So we have, and these are capital projects, and these are all what are proposed by the Finance Committee. And we're also proposing here how we would pay for these projects. With the exception, the first one here, I'm sorry. This first one is just the engineering for the school roof. That's $60,000. And that would come from, we're proposing to come from free cash. We've got the highway dump truck is $225,000 that we're proposing come from borrowing. Police cruiser, there's also fire department SUV, that's $54,000 and $45,000 that we propose come from free cash. Some accounting software is $20,000. Electronic speed boards, these are the speed boards you see along the road for highway controlling speeds. So that's $12,000. And then the last item here is a new library building, which would be $1,811,000 that would come from some reserves, different reserve locations, as well as borrowing. And I'll get into more detail on that one farther down. So if we, and again, these are all projects that we as a committee are proposing, and will be on warrants for Saturday's meeting. If we were to go ahead with all of these projects, and a big and, we want to include, as we know, we will have a school roof funding project coming forward quite soon. And we've plugged in a number of $750,000 of capital for that project. So this isn't part of the $750,000 is not part of a warrant for tomorrow's or for Saturday's meeting. But for our reserves analysis, we are plugging that number in there so that we understand, because we know we're going to need this project. We know we're going to do it soon. So we need to consider what the implications are for our ending cash reserves. So this cash reserve balance includes all of the proposed projects plus a project that we know is coming quite soon with what we think is a very conservative high estimate of $750,000. So if that were all to be the case, we would end up with free cash of $458,000, capital stabilization of $245,000, and stabilization of $131,000 for a total of $834,000. So that really drops our reserves a lot. It brings us from a very high position to a position we're getting to the low end of where we'd like to be. But we think this is still a good, a healthy reserve. There's a couple of asterisks here. The free cash does not include the addition that comes in after fiscal year 22. I don't want to go through a lot of detail on what this means, but for the most part, and looking at how the budget for fiscal year 22 is shaping up, we do expect some money to flow back into the free cash account over the coming months. So we expect that free cash number to increase, but we're not plugging anything in there. We're looking at this from a conservative perspective. And it also expects, or it's assuming that we don't get a grant for the roof. And this we think is the safest, obviously the safest. We're pushing ahead for a 50% grant, which would pay for basically half of the roof. But these numbers, these cash numbers, assume that we don't get that. We will not get that grant. Okay, so that's something we won't know for, I guess, still some weeks or months. Section 6. And again, I'm going to get into more detail farther down on the library and on the roof. But section 6 just talks about upcoming projects. We also, for purposes of managing our reserves, it's important to understand what kind of projects do we have going on beyond what we're already looking for funding at Saturday's meeting. We need to look at, for example, the roof. That's $750,000. That's going to be something we're going to be looking for doing this year. And then these other projects are projects that we just plugged in here for years beyond this year. I think one of the documents that's in the folder that we've referenced earlier, there is a document in there that highlights it. Becky, am I right on this? There's a document that goes through the capital plan well into the future as far as what we have plugged in.
I will make sure it's in there. I'm not positive.
It is in there.
Okay, thank you guys.
Yeah, okay, so that's already in there. So that gives you the complete detail of projects well into the future. This just gives you projects that we're looking at for later this year as well as next year, the next fiscal year. So fiscal year 24 beginning July 1st, 2024. There's also a project here for fiscal year 25. And we plugged in one of the 25-26 projects, this regional school roof and track. We plugged that in there because that could end up being a pretty significant number for us. And as well as it's just getting, we need to, there's no other 25-26 projects in here right now, but this is one we're aware of, and it's one that's going to get some, there's a lot of push in the 4 towns to get this project moving. So we want to plug that in here. Okay, now the next 2 sections go over some details on 2 of the key capital projects. The first is the library. The total cost is 6.4 million. And then here are the funding sources down the list here. There's the state grant, which is 3,947,000. There's a state credit for the land of 58,000. There's the library building fund, and this is the money that we all as a town have been voting to put aside on an annual basis for about the last 10 years. The next is money that the library has been raising on their own through fundraisers, donations, you name it, enormous range of activities. And they've collected, as of recently, $324,000. Okay, so those above, those are all items that are either already in hand or the state has agreed to allocate to us. The last three items are really ones that are impacted by Saturday's meeting. And that's, this is the funding that we would be looking at and that we propose as a committee for Saturday's meeting. There's a stabilization fund would support $238,000 of this project. Capital stabilization would support 150,000. And then we're looking at a debt exclusion override or borrowing, which would be $1.173 million. Okay, so those three items add up to about, let's see, 28% of the project. So we're looking at funding a $6.4 million project, and we're looking to fund it with our piece of it is 28% of the project.
Yeah.
Okay, if we can go to page 4. Okay, so more details on the borrowing, and that's that $1.173 million loan that was referenced on the prior page. We're proposing a 20-year loan. The first year impact would be, and this is for the average home value. The average home value in Shutesbury, the impact from a tax perspective would be $122.50 for the year. The next bullet, the tax impact will decrease over time. And we can get into detail on all of this. This is the way municipal debt works, and we can get into more detail explaining any of this later. The debt exclusion override requires a separate ballot vote, and that would happen sometime after Saturday's meeting. Okay. The school roof. So we've already proposed in 4A above $60,000 to conduct an engineering study, and that will help us get a clearer picture of the cost. If that $60,000 is approved, that would start pretty much right away, and then the next step would be to go out to bid. As I mentioned earlier, there's a potential for 50% of cost to be funded by grant, but for purposes of our cash balances and reserves, we're not counting on that. The funding plan, if the state grant is rejected, so this would be our plan to fund the project, the school roof project, $275,000 from free cash, $175,000 from stabilization, and $300,000 from this ARPA fund. ARPA meaning this as American Rescue Plan or the federal funding. And this would also involve a special town meeting probably sometime this fall. Okay, section 9. Yeah, one other point here. Like I said, that on the school roof, that's section B, and how it would be funded, that's all reflected in the ending cash reserves. OPEB. Other post-employment benefits. This is a big number for us, so we have a separate section for it. The actuarial liability is, and we as a finance committee did meet with the actuarial people fairly recently. So we did this, we have updated information as of the beginning of this year. So the liability as of June of last year is $3,570,000. So far, we've saved $712,000, and that's before this year's proposed budget. We're at, and we have been recently over the last couple of years, and we're proposing this year a $50,000 for this budget. We think that our current savings is pretty much in line with where we need to be based on our most recent discussions with actuarials and our own internal team discussions. So we're going to continue, or we're proposing continuing with allocating $50,000 towards OPEB. And as we always need to, we need to continue to monitor as conditions change. We need to monitor and see if we're on the right track with regard to how we're funding this on an annual basis. But for this upcoming year's budget, we're proposing staying the same with where we've been the last couple of years or few years. Okay, and then there's the last section is section 10. Capital plan recommendations and reserve fund summary documents. I'm not sure these are on that select board webpage yet, but I guess they will be. I think they'll be on there sometime this week. But this word indicates they're already there. That's not quite there yet. We need to continue to, as this key role of us on the finance committee is to continue to monitor economic factors that impact us. Recently, we've had to deal with COVID. Maybe coming up, we've got inflation. We all have seen signs of inflation, I think, in our lives. So just as examples. C, storage of public records, the need for additional space. D, invest in projects to reduce operating costs. So this is something, there's been this one project as an example, the photovoltaic systems that's been out there for a bit, but that's an example of looking for ways to reduce our costs and find some projects that support that. The next section has to do with the school. There's the ongoing loss of grant funds for early childhood education, regional school OPEB, and health insurance. Some of this is not unique to us. This is stuff that's going on everywhere across the country. Some of these items, some of these type items. School committee policy, number 3 here. School committee policy for the use of school choice funds for the budget. There's been quite a bit of activity this year on that. There's been discussions between the finance committee and the school committee, and then those continue. Continued maintenance of a 40-plus-year-old elementary school building. So I think maybe the roof is a good example of that. Those projects will continue. It's getting to be an old building. 5, the regional school buildings, maintenance and capital costs. So we did reference that a little bit in the capital section about the project that'll be coming up in 3 or 4 years. F, health insurance costs for elementary school and town employees. Again, that's something that is a challenge across the country. G, we all know about unpaved, just about all of us know about the unpaved roads in towns, and the issues associated with them, as well as culverts, bridges, etc. And then finally, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, looking for new revenue sources. Like I said earlier, us residential taxpayers contribute 94% of the revenues, and we need to continue to challenge ourselves to bring that ratio down and still maintain the type of living standard of living or type of living or feel that we have here in Shutesbury that's pretty unique. So that's quite a challenge, getting that balance. So that's what we had to report. And hopefully this allows for some information, some better understanding, as well as create some questions. So Paul, back to you.
Thank you, Jim. That was a lot of really important information there that you conveyed. And I just want to take a moment and extend my appreciation to all the members of the Finance Committee. I mean, it's no easy feat to produce a report like that has so much information behind every single line that we just saw. So, you know, this committee works really hard all year long, and I think we all really need to understand that and appreciate them for it. So thank you, Finance Committee. So we are going to move into the question and answer period now. Couple reminders. I know some people joined the meeting after I had gone through some of my introductory remarks and kind of some of the procedural information. I just want to remind those newcomers that if you have a question that you want to have answered, please use the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Send the questions to me, and then I will convey them on to the appropriate person. Also, it's important to us to know who is present at this meeting because it is a Shutesbury meeting. And we want to make sure, especially when we get into the questioning period, that questions are being asked by Shutesbury residents and not others. So if by chance the handle or the name attached to to your screen does not reflect exactly who you are, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's just your first name, maybe it's a phone number, please rectify that now. I think you can, there's probably a little more button, I think, next to your name that will allow you to rename that label. So please do that now so that we know exactly who is present and who is asking the questions. So with that said, I will now start on the questions that were submitted via email beforehand. First question is about the line number 179 in the budget that's labeled transfer to stabilization. The question is, what was that budget line discussed that budget line was discussed at length at last year's town meeting, just in the way of identifying what this questioner is talking about. The question is, can the FinCom explain the origin of that budget line? How much can be borrowed before the capacity of that line presumably is reached? And what loans are currently proposed to be paid through that line?
Okay, Becky, I'm thinking, do you have the expense or for the budget, the budget side?
Yeah.
Maybe if we pull up the section, because I think, and this is for everybody's information, this is all on that site. So you should be able to pull up the revenues and the budget detail information that Becky's going to be showing
So
now.
the expense side we need, right, for this?
Yep. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But because I think it's best to, if we can see something all together here. If not, we'll try to talk our way through it. And in general, for this section, we'll try to get everybody from the Finance Committee involved with different elements, or as much as possible, with regard to the questions and answers. Okay, beautiful.
178, Becky.
Yep. It's right here.
Okay, so 179.
No,
Yeah.
178.
One
It's
seventy-eight.
170.
You meant 178. It's line 178.
The most recent budget, it's line 179.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That you're, Bob and Susie, you might be looking at a slightly older version we had. I think
Yeah.
Vicky might have renumbered some of the lines.
All right.
There was one new line, the electrical line.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that, George, do you want to take a shot at that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm happy to explain it. So I'm just trying to find a launch off point here. So we transfer, this line is a transfer to the capital stabilization fund from the operating budget. It's roughly 1.6% of our budget. And what we do with this line, so I think everybody understands the stabilization funds, but I'll explain them real quick. You know, we have the free cash, which is generated from excess revenue or underspent lines in our budget at the end of the year. Free cash is certified, which means that all the extra cash that wasn't spent or extra cash collected in the current year will be added to the cash balance. Stabilization is different. Stabilization accounts are used for capital purchases. That's the capital stabilization account. And we also have a stabilization account, a general stabilization account that covers all types of expenses, capital or large unexpected expenses. Stabilization is funded from two sources. One of them is the operating budget. This line here is $113,000, I'll call it, and that's in our tax rate. Again, 1.6% of our overall budget. The other way we fund it is when we have excess cash in free cash, when our balances get so high that we feel comfortable moving some of that free cash, we'll move it into stabilization. And the purpose of the stabilization account is, like I said, for those large capital items, they call it a stabilization account because by saving money through the transfers from cash or having a small portion of our budget funded each year, we build up a cash reserve so that when large capital purchases come along, we can spend money out of the stabilization to pay for those, and we don't need to impact the budget at all beyond this 113. So it was a way for us to put money away each year. And that's been going on for about, 15, 16, 17 years we've been doing this. So the other reason I refer to it as a stabilization fund, it's the way I refer to it as a stabilization fund. This line, we look at it in concert with line 162, really the total debt service below line 162, which is on this screen. When we take on new debt, we will have to fund that debt in this budget. And we fund it through the operating account, through the operating budget. Again, lines 156 down to 162, the principal portion and the interest portion. When that debt comes into play for the first time, the first year that we'll have debt service, we will find out from the treasurer what the debt service payments will be and we'll budget for it. To the extent that we will be doing that, adding that to the budget, we decrease line 179. So if the debt service on a new highway truck or the culvert, which are two items that we will be borrowing for, comes out to $100,000, nice and simple, then we would have to budget in fiscal 24 $100,000. And so in fiscal 23, both those projects are going to move forward. We're going to need to borrow the money. The work will get done. The first debt service payments will occur in FY24. FY24, in my example, we would put $100,000, $106,000, $110,000 in debt service in the two separate areas, principal portion, interest portion. That would normally cause an increase in the tax rate because that would increase our expenses on the bottom line. But what we've been doing is decreasing line 79 to the extent that we've been increasing the debt service line. So if my example were to happen, the 100,000 would be the new debt service amount. We would decrease the 113 by 100,000. So next year, the total of the two would be equal to the total of two this year, 113,000, which means year to year, we would not be increasing the bottom line. And therefore, we wouldn't be increasing property taxes. And, you know, that's the other type of stabilization. The way I look at the stabilization funds is the way we fund it, we can adjust how much we fund from the operating budget to stabilize the impact on the tax bills. I'll just finish by saying we've been doing this for 15 years. We've had a highway truck in the past. We had a bucket loader in the past. We had a fire truck in the past, and it's gone up and down. We'd add maybe 50, 60,000, and then we would decrease the other one by that amount. So we could still make small contributions to capital stabilization. I think that we have two items. Last year, we approved the culvert, and the culvert is going to be funded by debt. That project didn't happen in FY22 because of delays by the utility company. It will happen in FY23. So the debt service for that, we were anticipating to budget for in FY23. However, because of delay, it will be FY24, which means we could continue to fund the full 113 in this current fiscal year coming, in the fiscal year coming. And then this year, we've made the decision to finance a highway truck for $225,000. So in FY24, pretty much the example I gave, roughly $100,000 to $110,000 in debt service is going to happen. And again, this stabilization line will be decreased correspondingly, if you will. And so there will be no increase in property taxes. And again, this is a concept that has allowed us to keep fluctuations when we have large capital purchases that are too big for cash. Sometimes they're not, but it allows us to be able to pay for things over the long term by not making huge swings in our budget, by putting aside 1.5% to 2% of our budget towards this capital stabilization account and being consistent in debt service and being consistent. We've basically been able to fund many, many things, the fire truck, the highway truck, those things I mentioned in the past, and these other things coming, without increasing our taxes year to year.
There's not an easy answer to that one. So it has to be a long one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm long-winded.
Yeah, Paul. Well, yeah, but it's not easy to explain in a short.
Do you want to keep the budget up?
I think at least keep it handy, at least.
Yeah, there are a couple other questions, not so much about specific lines. Well, maybe, yeah, there might be one or two. So yeah, sure, you could leave it up. Okay. Jim, are you ready to move on?
Yes.
Next question?
Yeah. I'm sorry that there really isn't a short answer to that question.
Understandable. Okay,
Yeah.
Next question. Would you please explain how the bond for the new library will impact our taxes over the next 20 years?
Okay.
Goes a little bit beyond this year's budget, but it's still, I think, an important question that's on a lot of people's mind.
Yeah.
I can continue the thought.
Yeah. You want to go ahead with that?
Yeah,
It's sort of on the same track there, George.
Well, George Avernaitis again. So we talked about free cash and stabilization. We talked about borrowing in the operating budget. The other thing to talk about is how we're going to finance the library, which is a debt exclusion override, something we don't do very often. The last major one was in the 1990s for the elementary school addition. When we talk about the budget impact on our taxes, and I gave an example of how we are trying to keep, one thing we do to keep the bottom line from fluctuating. The bottom line is $6.7 million. The assessor is going to have to make sure that the town of Shutesbury raises $6.7 million. And Jim showed everyone how we're going to collect those funds, what the sources are. What the assessor does is he takes the $6.7 million, he subtracts the state funding, which he gets from the state. They'll tell him exactly what they're going to be sending to us in the form of aid. And then the local receipt calculations that we estimate here as a finance committee, but he'll refine. Kevin Rudin will refine as this process proceeds for him. He'll get better estimates. He'll subtract the state aid, the local aid from the 6.7 million. And what's left over is the amount to be raised from property taxes. And so he'll take that amount, which last year was 5.3 million. He'll divide it into the value of all the taxable properties. He'll come up with a tax rate, and then he'll bill each and every one of us the value of our property times that tax rate. And when we all pay our tax bills, he will have collected, the town of Shutesbury would have collected $5.3 million, which along with the state aid and the local receipts will balance the budget. So the operating budget, subtract the revenue sources outside of property taxes, leaves you with the tax levy, property taxes, and we calculate a tax rate and we get billed. Debt exclusion override. Now, the debt that I described earlier is in the operating budget. It's in that calculation. Debt exclusion overrides are handled differently. The total budget is taken, the two estimates, state and local receipts, are subtracted, but before the tax calculation is made to bill everybody, the debt service on the library, call it $111,000 in year one. That 111 will be added to the 5.3 million that we had to calculate the tax rate on. So it'll be 5.4 million in the year that we start paying debt service in the library. That 5.4 million into the value of all the taxable properties will give us a tax rate. That tax rate will be, we're expecting about 45 cents higher than it would have been if we didn't have the library. And that's an impact of $1.23 on the average single family home. That number is currently $269,000. So the difference between the debt that we have in the operating budget is it's already built in the operating budget. So we don't ask for a tax increase to take on that debt because we use the stabilization fund. But when you have a debt excluded override, you're adding the debt service on that above and beyond the budget. And then you're calculating how much taxes to collect. And just one final note on that. Debt exclusion overrides, we really do them for a number of reasons, but the number one reason is it's the debt service on a project of this magnitude. It's just too great to put in the operating budget. Another reason we do it is because debt exclusion overrides are temporary. Once the assessor is going to add that debt service to the tax calculation every year over the 20 years of the loan. But that amount is going to decrease each year. And so by roughly $3,000 a year for the first 10 years and then lower towards the end. So we're not building that into the operating budget. We're just adding it to the budget. So each year we're going to get a slight decrease on our tax bills. And then at the very end, year 20, the last payment's going to get made and it's going to drop right out of the tax calculations, which is what we want because this is a 100-year building. We don't have to worry about in 20 years having to take on new debt to pay for another building. So that's another real important benefit. And finally, you want a long-term loan on something as big as the library. Everybody agrees that if the library is passed and approved, that we want to spread the cost to not only the residents in town now, but to future residents as well. It always makes sense to have debt that has a duration that is more in line with the life of the property. You wouldn't take out a car loan for 30 years type of thing. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, George.
Two not easy questions, long answers.
Yeah, so
Necessary.
so I think the gist of that, to get back to the original question, was that for the average homeowner in town, they could expect their taxes to go up approximately $123 the first year, and then slowly, I think, or minor decreases, I think you said, George, over the life of the loan, assuming that they stay in town for the next 20 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's keep moving then. The next question is in regards to the school roof replacement. Will the town be asked to borrow for this roughly $750,000 project?
Yeah, I think we can make that a fast one. I think, and maybe that question was asked beforehand. We went through the how we propose paying for the roof, and none of that would be borrowing.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And I should say that even though you do explain things sometimes along the way, I just want to make sure that questions do get asked the way they were submitted, even if your answer is, a duplication of what you had said earlier.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going through a lot of information in a short period of time. So, yeah, no, absolutely.
Right.
Understand. And I'm just thinking, how are we looking? We have, I don't know what kind of a list of questions you have. We've got roughly 30 minutes left.
Yeah,
Are we okay?
we're getting there.
You think we're okay?
We're about a third of the way through. I am getting some new ones on chat, but we'll move along.
Okay.
So the next question is in regards to the fire department budget, specifically the maintenance line. This actually came from our fire chief, who noted that last year the maintenance line of that budget went over budget by about $3,000. And if not for a significant amount of deferred or in-house maintenance this year, it would have gone over budget again. Why did you choose to not increase that budget line in the proposed budget as was requested by the chief?
Okay, it looks like we're asking about line 94. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Oh, we had a lot, this was we on the finance committee had a lot of discussion on this one, as we had a lot of argumentation and discussion on a lot of things, but we did on this one as well, or in particular. Bob, do you want to give this one a shot?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Walter came before us with his budget proposal. I know this question was asked by Walter, and the way I recall that conversation, Walter pointed out to us something that we were aware of, that he brought to his job. He did a lot of maintenance on the equipment at the fire department, and that was something that he thought would not necessarily be true in the future after his retirement. And so he wanted to, the way I recall it, he asked us to increase the maintenance line between, I think, two sums, some range of.
I think it was double. I think it was like it was going to be 11. It was going to be 22,000 instead of the 11.
And so then I pointed out to him at the time that he was doing that work, and that was something that we were aware of and grateful for. But if the new person, he or she would be replacing Walter, wasn't able or willing to do that work, then we shouldn't be paying them to do it like we were for Walter. So I felt that either way, we shouldn't be increasing, we should not be increasing that line pending the hiring of a new person. If that person cannot handle that, then I don't think they should be paid to do it. So that was my position. That's what we voted on. And if the line needed to be increased, we could increase it during the course of the year after we've done an evaluation of the circumstances in the department after the new hire had been made. So that is the way that I recall the discussion. We had a mixed vote, a split vote on it, but we decided to not increase that line pending the situation.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned increasing, I think we talked about the finance committee reserve, right?
We have the ability.
So that would be our backup plan. If what you're suggesting, Bob, doesn't work out, we would look at the FinCom reserve as a backup plan for that. For that 11,000, if it turned out to be the additional 11,000 that Walter was looking for. Yeah, one other comment on this, and Walter asked this question, and I think this is reflective of our department heads in general. We met with all of them, and I think we all were really impressed with the work effort that all of the heads put into they're proposing their budgets. I think they understand us as a town and the constraints and the challenges we all face, our financial challenges. And they work hard. I think all of the heads work hard to propose really what they need, what they really need. But occasionally we do push back. There are some things that we think there are other ways that they can be addressed. But I think I just want to point out the positive, not just for Walter, but all the department heads as far as how they present budgets as well as capital. When they bring their capital requirements to the capital planning committee. And then they end up with us, the same type of thing, the same type of work and effort it's a lot of work and effort, and it's appreciated. And I think it's reflected in Walter asking this question.
Thank you. And for those that might be wondering, Walter, everyone's referring to Walter, that would be Walter Tibbetts, our fire chief. Okay, the next question might be a difficult one, but again, I think it's an important enough one to ask, and let's see what you can do with it. When you consider the higher or increasing property assessments, the proposed new library, the school roof, the dump truck, the police cruisers, other large expenditures such as salaries, benefits, and pensions, loan payments, and interest to finance all of the above, what is the financial bottom line in dollars in regards to our property tax increases for the average home in Shutesbury? Might be a difficult one. Maybe someone could take a crack at this, maybe looking at this coming year for fiscal 23, and then maybe a little more generally beyond that, if you're able to answer it that way.
Yeah, I think over the course of those 4 pages, and hopefully when whoever asked the question and others would have similar interest, how are we paying for this? We've got a $6.7 million budget, and that's a 1% increase over last year. So that's one answer. We're increasing by 1%. We're also, our reserves will be going down. And we've shown that. We've shown those numbers, the exact change in our cash reserves. And then the third piece is debt. We are basically at 0 debt today. And what we've proposed is some debt in the future. And debt is, when people hear the word debt, some people have negative connotations, some positive, some different. But some level of debt at the municipal level is usually a good thing. And we've been operating at very low levels, well below the levels of the average Massachusetts town for a while. So having some debt is typically not an issue. But those, and to your answer, I guess that's an initial answer, is those 3 things. And I think they all show up on those pages. It's the budget, it's the change in reserves, and then it's debt, change in debt to address that list of items that person listed. Does that answer, Paul, or do you need more? Do you think you need more background?
I think the gist of the question was probably a concern about what a property tax is going to do, in the near future with all of these expenditures that the questioner listed. And I know, you kind of answered that for this coming year. Are you able to project beyond that at all?
For future years?
The immediate future.
Yeah.
Beyond next year.
The average tax, yeah, I see your hand. I see Susie wants to take a shot at that.
Yeah, I think that we can see over the last few years, the operating budget has been kept very low. And we can see that the tax rate for the operating budget is looking like it's going to go up about 33 cents this year per thousand. And we know that the library proposed one budget override looks like it's around 45 cents per thousand. And then in the future, we don't have right now more borrowing outside of the lines that George described, lines 179 and the debt and interest that are in the lines above. So even though this budget has, this process this year for FY23 has taken on a lot of projects, we've come through it using our cash reserves and having a very tight budget. And the impact is on the taxes is less dramatic or less fearsome than people might have assumed because of, as Jim described, we're using our cash reserves. And because we don't have a crystal ball and looking into the future, we do know that our relationship with the departments and most of the people that work for the town are also taxpayers, that the budget has been kept very tight. So in section, what's the section number? In section 6 of the Finance Committee's report, it does talk about upcoming capital projects. And again, the FinCom will sit down and try to find resources that meet those. Some of the COVID money, the ARPA money was available this time and some will be available in the future. Some CPA money can be used is appropriate to be used on the track project. So what the FinCom does is look at its resources. And even though we've made a pretty big dent in our capital, in our cash reserves, our town reserves, we still have a fair amount of room. So we just do our best.
Thank you, Susie. That wasn't really an easy question to answer. So so I appreciate your efforts. Okay, so we have like 4 or maybe 5 remaining questions, and we've got just a little over 15 minutes. So if anyone has any burning last questions that they want to try to slip in, now's your chance to do so, because these 4 will probably bring us close to 7:30. So next one actually involves some of the other articles in the warrant, but since they're also addressed in the budget documents, we'll ask them now. Do we really need 3 new vehicles all in 1 year? Dump truck, police department, and fire department. It's a very high cost for all 3 in 1 year.
Let's see, AJ hasn't participated. And AJ, you're on the capital planning team. Maybe, do you want to try and take a shot at that? Okay.
Well,
Unmute.
Can you unmute yourself, AJ? No? Okay, let me find you.
Find AJ.
There he is.
Where's AJ? Okay, so now you should be able to unmute. There you
Okay,
go.
great. Thanks. Yeah, so I mean, maybe I should just explain to everybody that really the entire list of proposed capital projects that will appear in the various warrants on Saturday were all, I think maybe the proper way to say this is they were projects that were proposed by department heads and presented to the capital planning committee, which consists of, I think, five members, if memory serves, and there are a couple of FinCom members who sit on that committee as well. Bob and I do. And the process there is really that, you know, the departments, in addition to proposing a budget for FY23, we asked them if there were particular capital projects that they wanted to propose for this year. And so in all 3 cases, so the dump truck, the police cruiser, and the fire department SUV, those department heads came to the capital planning committee and had, you know, a pretty detailed discussion with that committee about kind of what their needs were and why they were proposing to spend that money in FY20, or have the town spend that money on those projects in FY23, and they were voted on ultimately by the capital planning committee. So all of those projects were essentially recommended to by the capital planning committee, and then FinCom's job was to come up with a proposal for how those projects would be funded. I think it's fair to say that, you know, while there may have been, you know, some disagreement within the capital planning committee, there were majorities in the committee voted to approve all three of those projects. There were sort of various issues with each of the vehicles that were being replaced. And there were sort of lengthy discussions in that committee, and those department heads were asked to essentially justify why those vehicles were needed. And, you know, without, I think, getting like super detailed, what I think I can tell you now is that I think most of the capital planning committee felt like a compelling case was made that those were vehicles that needed to be purchased. And, you know, I think in the case of the dump truck, even though we're voting on this on Saturday, I think everybody's kind of aware of how long it can take to get a vehicle in this climate right now. And so even though on Saturday, the town is being asked to vote on whether to approve that dump truck, I think it's likely, I think even Tim might have said at our meeting that it's very likely that that vehicle wouldn't even arrive until FY24, just because of all of the sort of supply chain issues and just how long it can take to get the vehicle. So I don't know, that's kind of a summary. Hopefully that is a little helpful.
Thank you, AJ. Okay, moving right along. This may not be a FinCom question, but maybe it is. We'll see who wants to answer this one. Why hasn't the school roof been replaced in its entirety? And why can't we use ARPA or ARPA funds to replace the rest of the roof right now?
Well, we are looking at ARPA for part of the funding. Bob, I see your hand up. You want to take this one on?
Yeah, I'll try to shed some light on that question.
Yeah.
First of all, we have applied for a grant this year, so we have an obligation to the taxpayer to see if we get that money. I supported us putting money in the budget for the roof, assuming that we may not get that money, but the engineering will be funded if the town meeting approves it. The school roof, I'm on the building committee and I'm on the finance committee and capital planning, and we have been talking about this issue for a long time. And it's distressing to a lot of us, including myself, that we haven't got this job done yet. There's got to be a great sense of urgency all around for us to get this job done this year. So we got to get this project rolling this year. If we don't get the state money, I think the finance committee is prepared to support going forward with the roof. I think that I wished it was in the budget right now. That was my wish, but that's not what was supported by the committee. Town meeting, people can talk about it then if they need to, but yeah, this roof is going to get going this year. I think that the finance committee has told me that they would support funding this if the state money didn't come, and they would support a special town meeting to get that funding established. So if it doesn't happen at town meeting, it's hopefully going to happen this next fiscal year, and the construction could be done next summer. That's my hope.
Yeah, and I think that's the hope for everyone on the finance committee. I think we're all on the same page with regard to the urgency of this project and getting it done as quickly as possible. I guess I misunderstood the question, and I said doing part of the roof. Is there another part that we're missing, or is this?
No, I think you answered the question based on my understanding of it. There's a follow-up from another person as well, which you've skirted around a lot of this already, but I will ask the question just in case anybody wants to add anything else. According to what's already been said, the roof project will be done, quote, this year. So why not make it part of the warrant now? And would there be any additional tax burden on property owners?
Yeah, the position we've taken as a committee is we put $60,000 aside for engineering, for the engineering work for them, and the engineering, based on the engineering work, they'll figure out exactly what needs to be done to the roof, and then we can go forward with quotes to address what the engineers tell us needs to be addressed. And that's the point where we would, and it's hopefully it's in the next couple of months, where we would be able to have a special town meeting to request appropriation of funds to get this project done. Like I said, from the cash reserves perspective, we've already plugged in money for this year, for this fiscal year, this upcoming fiscal year, to support this project. Becky, did you
Okay.
want to add on to that, or?
My
Or-
thinking when I heard the question was they were wondering, why did we do the gym roof? And not the entire roof? The answer was we spent the $300,000 on the gym roof. And it's completed. It was completed in April. We were taking one piece at a time because taking on $1 million project for the town when we were still applying for grant money seemed irresponsible. We wanted to hopefully get the grant money for at least the larger portion of the roof if possible. And still move and still keep the project moving. The gym roof, it was the heart of a lot of problems. The gym roof has been an issue for 15 years, and we are grateful to have the leaking stop there, and I'm sure Bob agrees with that.
Susie, you have your hand up, and maybe because you're part of the school committee, maybe you have more insight. One quick comment before Susie talks. Pretty much everyone on the finance committee, I mentioned earlier, AJ being part of capital planning. So we as finance committee members are also involved to some extent as members of other committees. So we get to get a sense for what's happening, for example, with capital planning, where AJ and Bob are part of. Susie represents finance committee on with the school committee. Melody and George are members on the personnel board, and Jim Hemingway works with the broadband committee. So I'm not sure. I don't think I'm missing anybody, but just a point that we all have side jobs working with these other committees, which is it's actually quite effective because we are able to bring the finance committee perspective to these other committees, and then we can bring from these other committees their perspective to us, to the finance committee. So it's an effective process. So sorry, Susie.
I just wanted to, Becky answered a lot of it. The reason the project got broken into two pieces was to manage some immediate part with the gym roof. And we did it with the same process we're doing this part with. We start off with, it comes to capital planning. They helped understand how to proceed. We get an engineering grant. That engineering grant leads to a clear understanding of what needs to be done. And then we get bids, and then we fund getting that accomplished. That's how we did the gym part. So the town has been willing to address things, and they are still willing, and they are still in the plan that says we start off with an engineering, we get some bids, and then we fund it. And we're prepared for that. And so using a plan that gets an engineering bid and then a construction bid is a logical and rational way to go about tackling especially big projects.
I think you're on mute, Paul.
I am. Now I'm not. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I still have one other question that I'm trying to understand fully. I will say that, you know, as often happens at these sessions, I start getting comments from people rather than questions in the chat, and I can't really deal with those. Sometimes people start asking questions that are starting to get a little bit outside of the realm of what we're here to deal with tonight. So I'm sorry to those people that would like me to convey other information that I'm just not feeling is appropriate to or germane to our discussion here. And maybe if we have a little time in the next couple of minutes, I will try to get back to one of those. But first, let me try to ask this one. And Becky, I think for this one, if you could bring back up the maybe Jim, or maybe it was you, Jim, that had originally put up your the FinCom report that included the cash reserves summary that showed that we would end up with $834,000. If that's available to put back up, it would be very helpful. This question asks about that and says, if his figures are correct, if we don't get any state funds for the school roof, then the proposed free cash would drop to 275. And maybe I should wait for that that list, because then we'll be able to see if these figures are accurate or not.
Yeah, Becky, you still have that, the 4-page report floating around? There we go.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
What section was it? 6?
The cash
higher
reserve
up, higher up,
summary.
higher up.
5,
Yeah, okay, there we,
5,
Right
5.
there.
yeah, 5. Okay, yeah. So this,
Okay.
again, this is a worst case scenario. This $834,000 is a worst case scenario. So this is assuming that we do not get any grant for the roof.
Right.
Okay, this
Yeah,
is assuming that the project is funded by a combination of, you have to go down a little bit further if we want to look at the breakdown for how we would fund the roof.
No, I don't think that's necessary for this question.
Yeah, but the point is, no, this 834, this is a worst case scenario.
Okay, I think the issue is that free cash at 458 already had the school roof. Yeah, I'm just double checking. The $275,000 has already been deducted in that free cash balance for the school roof. Paul, was the question?
The
They were saying
750? Well,
yeah.
yeah, again, I'm trying to,
275 out of free cash
So,
and 175 out of stabilization. So those figures are already reflected in 5. The balance is recommended there. Our net of funding for the school roof.
Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
highlighted here. If you see it in the sentence, right here in the header here for number 5, school roof funding.
Right. Yeah.
Estimated $750,000.
I think the question assumes some other things which are not necessarily accurate. And the questioner thought that we only would have $384,000 remaining in reserves, but your figures as reflected here on the screen right now are accurate.
Yeah, reflecting that there's no grant. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
I just double checked the spreadsheet where that number came from. It appears to be accurate.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I think we'll just go with that. And I know, George, did you have something to add to that? Or Susie?
I was basically going to say what Becky said. It's on the spreadsheet, and I was just going to go over how much free cash was going to each thing. It adds up to 716, which is the difference between the starting and the ending balance. But we don't need to get in that level of detail. Becky confirmed
And
that.
that spreadsheet will be posted along with other documents. So people will be able to see the capital plan funding spreadsheet that shows where each part of the funding goes and what are the remaining balances on a spreadsheet.
It'll show the math.
Okay, so I'm sorry to that last question. If I've mangled your question, I tried to understand it. And I think the bottom line is what has just been stated here, that those cash reserve figures that you see on the screen right now reflect the true situation, including money set aside for the school roof. So with that, I'm not getting any other, haven't received any other new questions, just a few comments. And I think I will close down this section of the program, let the Finance Committee go eat their dinner if they like. For those that are interested, remember, we're going to come back probably in about 10 minutes And we will go through the other warrant articles just so people have an understanding of what they are. This is, not, again, not a time to debate them or express your opinion about them. That'll all happen on Saturday. But if there are questions that you have about what particular warrant articles even mean, this would be a great opportunity for you to ask those questions. So thank you so much to all Finance Committee members. Thank you, Jim, for leading us through this. We will see you all on Saturday. Some of you will see in 10 minutes if you choose to stay. So, and thank you to all the people who showed up tonight. I think at the high point, we had about 41 total participants this evening. I think that was a pretty good turnout. And I expect a lot more people to be there on Saturday. So for those of you that didn't get to ask the questions you really wanted to ask, Saturday will be an excellent opportunity for that. So thank you all again. If there are no final comments from Jim or any Finance Committee members or Becky, we will adjourn for a brief period and be back here in about 10 minutes. For those that want
I just want to thank you, Paul, for leading us through this process for the last hour and a half. Much appreciated.
Very welcome. So, okay, thank you all. Good night for some of you.
Thank you, Paul. All right, so I should not exit the meeting.
True. Becky, I was just going to put something up on the screen that says we'll be back at like 7:40. Okay, can I just share a document that just says that?
Fabulous, and
And
yeah, that's great. And
if
you're
I can
good to
figure
go.
out how to do that.
It's a green
Share
and-
screen. I see it.
And then you have to do a second thing where you spot it on your hard on the desktop
Right.
and guess the image, and then you have to click on your image and then go back and hit share again.
Okay. Blah, 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 blah. It looks like it's giving me options for who can share the screen, but I'm not seeing. Oh, okay. Got it now. Can you see that?
You did it. Back at 7:40.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right. See you soon. Okay, so that was a fast 10 minutes. Thank you to the couple dozen people, it looks like, who have decided to stay for the second part of the meeting this evening. We're going to be discussing or explaining at least the other warrant articles. I've only received a couple questions regarding the other articles in the warrant, but I know some people, perhaps I see a lot of seasoned veterans here this evening, but I suspect there may be some who are new to town meetings. So I think we will kind of quickly go through and kind of provide an overview of many of these articles that many of us are very familiar with, but others may not be. So Becky, I'll probably rely on you to do a lot of this explaining. I think what I'd like to do is keep this one, this session a bit more informal than the last one, where I was asking people to submit chat questions just to me. We'll see how it goes. You know, I mean, the chat questions work fairly well, but if someone just has a burning question that they think of and they just want to raise their hand, I may be inclined to just allow you to ask. So we'll kind of see how that goes. So Becky, do you want to, do you have the warrant available? And you're muted. Do I need, no, you can unmute yourself, right?
Sorry, I will get that right up.
So the warrant is a combination of a number of articles, some of which are fairly routine, some of which are very familiar, like the first one, which is just to hear and receive reports of town officers, committees, and boards. You know, we oftentimes have one opportunity per year to hear from some of the committees that are working all year long on our behalf. So it's a great opportunity to just hear from them, to see what they've been up to and see if they have any particular news that they want to share with us. That's Article 1. Article 2 is one that's often discussed you know, quite a bit at town meeting, because it involves a fairly large expenditure in our budget, and that is the regional school assessment. The regional school district, you know, includes Shutesbury, that's the middle school and high school down in Amherst that many of our kids end up going to after they graduate our elementary school here. So that assessment can be calculated in different ways. We've had an active group of people in town that have been working hard to change the way that assessment is done this year, and they've been working towards what's often referred to as the statute, that 100% statutory with a 5-year rolling average method of calculating our assessment. And Becky, do you want to explain that a little bit more? And there was a more specific question about that also that I'll get to in a minute.
Yes, I think the issue for people is this, it starts on the 4th line where it says, for the fiscal year 2023 only, the alternative operating budget assessment shall be calculated as a 5-year average of minimum contributions. That equals 100% statutory. So for this year, it has been agreed to by all 4 towns. We will be the last town voting this article, but the other 3 towns have already supported it. And what that means is what we have been, you know, working towards for over 7 or 8 years, maybe 10, has been achieved for this year. The only question mark left to us is that it has been said by the region that there will be work done this summer to negotiate with the 4 towns and write and make this a permanent change, which would require a vote by all 4 towns in the region. So this is step 1. It has been agreed to and supported by all 4 towns for this year. But the next step would have to be taken for it to become permanent. and would also require another town meeting vote or a special town meeting vote, hopefully. But that's what's been talked about. Steve Sullivan, if he's here, has been involved in this throughout the whole time that he's been on the regional school committee. So I hope that answers the question, Paul.
It does, yeah. And then I'm glad you started off with, some of the confusing wording, because I think that was the gist of the question was, is this article the 100% statutory with a 5-year rolling average that we've been working towards and we've been hearing so much about in recent years? And the definitive answer is yes. Okay, good. Unfortunately, the person who asked that question was not able to be at this session tonight, but she will be anxiously awaiting to hear what that answer was. Okay, Article 3 is the and 4 both deal with the MLP Enterprise Fund. The MLP is our municipal light and power entity, which runs not our lights and our power, but our internet access, our broadband. And they have their own budget, basically, that, and most of, I think virtually all of that, well, I won't say that. Much of this money comes from the fees that are charged to subscribers, like, I don't know, at this point, somewhere like 90-something% of the town are subscribers to our broadband. There weren't any questions about this. This is pretty, even though it looks kind of complicated, it's pretty routine stuff. The MLP people are on hand. Some of them are here right now. They're on hand at town meeting to explain this further if there are any questions on town meeting floor. And I'm just trying to keep track of the chat here too, just in case there are any questions about this. I don't see any. Becky, did you want to add anything about the MLP articles?
Well, if Jim Hemingway is here, he might want to, just because the amazing news in this budget is it's represents a drop in cost for all subscribers. They have just finalized a contract, an intergovernmental contract with Shield. It's South Hadley Electric. And because of the new agreement, they are facing considerable savings and are planning a $10 a month, I believe, reduction in fees. Jim, is Jim Hemingway here? I can't see with the sharing.
It does not look like he is.
Okay, so we'll move on, but I'm sure Gail will enjoy making that announcement at town meeting because it's very good news. And the first article number 3 that you're looking at represents paying off a significant piece of the bonding, which is also lowering their operational costs, also allowing them to pay, reduce fees for all of us.
Yeah, that's certainly the other good news piece here is that, at least according to the wording of Article 3, they're making the final payment on the construction loan, basically, that was taken out to build our broadband infrastructure.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. And again, I'm trying to monitor the chat, see if there are any questions along the way here. We get to Article 5, the debt exclusion vote for the library. I think that was pretty well explained. We'll be hearing, no doubt, a lot more about this at town meeting on Saturday. If anyone has a burning question about that, they could maybe submit a quick chat right now. Otherwise, I think I'm not seeing any. I think we will move on, knowing that we'll be hearing a whole bunch more about that one later on. Article 6 is another routine article, just to see if the town will set a salary compensation schedule for all elected officials in town. Just elected officials, this is, so school board, town clerk, moderator, and the constable.
Select boards. Unfortunately, the school board in Shutesbury doesn't get paid.
Thank you for that. So fairly routine. No questions about that. That I see. Nope. Okay. Article 7 is the budget article, and we just spent an hour and a half discussing that. So we'll move on from that one. Again, there'll be plenty of opportunity on Saturday to not only express your opinion about the budget, but also ask very specific questions about individual line items in the budget. So be sure to bring a copy of the budget if you're able to town meeting. It'll also be available on your various devices. Our broadband committee, our MLP, does a great job of providing us with a great broadband or internet signal right there behind town hall, so that we can all, be following along on our electronic devices if we choose to do it. Okay, let's see. Now we're moving into the section of the budget that includes a lot of the capital items, the capital purchases. So this would be Article 8 regarding money for solar powered speed board signs for the police department. Article 9 is in regards to some financial software for the accountant and the treasurer. 10 to borrow. This is a borrowing article, so it requires a 2/3 majority vote. And you'll see, yeah, I should have backed up and said this early on, that for each of these articles, we, or Becky, who puts this together, the warrant together, includes who sponsored the article. If it's a financial article, then it requires a vote by the finance committee to either recommend or not recommend it. So that that vote is included there, including the actual quantum of the vote, 6-0, 5-0 with 2 abstentions, 5-2, 4-2, as you can see going down the list here. So that that provides voters with an opportunity to see if these were unanimous decisions on the part of the finance committee or not. So so that's what all that bolded information is at the end of each of these articles. And again, I recognize that many of you that are here tonight are very familiar with all of this, but I don't want to assume that that everybody is. So I'm going to explain some of these fairly basic things that a lot of us know already. And then capital items continue down through 13, I guess. Becky, do you want to talk about any of these? Or Rita, or anybody else, that any other town officials?
Any of the capital items?
Yeah.
I guess, Rita, did you have any comments on them? I'm just scrolling back. I know, okay, that yes, the speed boards, article number 8, in the last year or so, Chief Burgess has been searching for a grant to help get more speed boards in town, especially at the lake and the top of the hill. We have problem areas, and this will be a very valuable tool, 3 tools that can be used all over town. And we hadn't been able to find a grant at that point, and so we really appreciate being able to take this request to town meeting, speaking for all of us because of the speeders. The article number 9, the Vadar financial software, is a new software for both the accountant and the treasurer. That is cloud-based. It is a gold standard for small municipal towns, one that we really need to address. We've talked about it with the financial team for a few years, but we didn't have as driving or burning reason that we had no other option, as we now do, that the other company that we have been using will not be cloud-based and we will not be able to renew our, we can't keep using that software. So Vadar is a system already used by both of our treasurer and accountant on the team. Comes highly recommended, and fortunately, the accountant is extremely well trained and the treasurer is learning the software. But we hope this is a wonderful thing for the town if it is supported, and will hopefully be supported, as we don't have many other options except for Excel spreadsheets, and you really want your finances handled more professionally. The next article, the dump truck. For those who don't know, our highway superintendent will be retiring this fall. But the truck that he is the oldest truck, I believe it's 19 years now, going on 20. The replacement, if funded, probably wouldn't arrive at least until next year. He's planning ahead for his successor and making sure that an essential piece of equipment, this is the 10-wheeler, the larger of the 3 snow plows and dump trucks that we have, a critical piece of information for the highway department. Article 11, the $60,000 has been set aside to move ahead with engineering if the grant fails. The next article, this article is a request for an SUV by the police department. This is actually the second year it was requested from capital plan. The first year capital plan rejected it, given where its placement on our capital plan was for this year, and also they felt that it wasn't time, or the vehicle that it was replacing didn't need to be replaced yet. But this year they did approve it, and the police department is moving forward with that request. And the last capital item is a request, a new request that we've never seen before at town meeting, which is a request from the fire department for an SUV for the chief. This request is being made by our retiring fire chief, and again, thinking ahead about his successor. The vehicle he currently has was a hand-me-down, his second or third hand-me-down from the police department. The concern was the hand-me-down vehicle this year is a sedan. It's not an SUV. And the chief felt that it's important to have an SUV for the fire department. The reason the cost is lower than the other vehicle, although they're almost identical, the difference in cost is because the fire chief's light is not purchasing the light bar system or the lighting system throughout the vehicle. Fire departments, I believe, use red instead of blue lights and use a different configuration. The plan the fire chief has is to take the light bar from the existing vehicle that is rusting out and put it on the new vehicle. Hence saving the town $9,000. The other difference is, I believe this vehicle will be picked up, will be able to be purchased right of way, and the other, the new Interceptor, which is a fuel efficient vehicle, it's a hybrid, will probably take a longer time to arrive. It could be up to 6 months or more. Okay, that's all of them, Paul.
Okay, Rita, Michael, Melissa, do any of you have anything to add on those? Okay,
No.
just just raise your hand if you'd like to say something. I'm not sure I finished my thought about the bolded information below each of the articles, but I was starting to say that most articles just require a majority vote at town meeting. Those that involve borrowing money, transfers from our stabilization account, or zoning bylaw changes all require a 2/3 majority. So that's why you'll see 2/3 majority on some of these, but majority vote for most of them. And Becky, I just wanted to get one clarification. I think I heard you say that the, in regards to Article 11, that the $60,000 for the engineering study on the elementary school roof is there in case the grant fails. Did you mean to say that?
I think well, definitely if the grant fails. We are, we're caught in a timing bind with the grant. We don't have an answer, and the only information I've learned recently is we will probably have a visit from the grantees, the grantors in August, and we won't have information maybe to early fall. So I don't know how we're going to work with that kind of timing, because the other information is our application was very well received by the MBLC. I'm sorry, the MSBA. Sorry, Mary Ann knows I said library instead of school. So the meeting we met today, the principal, superintendent, and school committee members met with the MSBA this morning, as well as myself. And during that meeting, they said they found our application compelling, and they are, I've never felt that we've been taken as seriously as now, and especially closer to hopefully the cutoff point they might go for this year of 30 years instead of, hopefully they'll bend it to 29. I believe our roof is 29 this year. So what has been happening every year is when our roof was 24 years old, they moved it to 25. When it was 25, they moved it to 27. When it was 20, it's been going like that for 4 years. And I'm just trying, I should just stop and just say, we're not unsure at this time, Paul. If the grant looks as certain as it might be important to hold off on the engineering, but we don't know yet.
Okay, thank you. If we decide to move ahead, and as we talked about with the finance committee a little bit earlier, and pay for the roof repair ourselves, we would still need an engineering and design phase for that, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So let's move on then to number 14. Article 14 involves the building committee, and a new bylaw has been developed, and that's what this is about. Who would like to explain this one a little bit?
I bet Rita will jump in.
I can do, I can do this. So this is creating a new bylaw. The original building committee was established at town meeting in 1988 and was a very brief, like 2-sentence article. And what this new bylaw does is really lay out roles and responsibilities of the Shutesbury Town Buildings Committee. So it goes into much more depth and addresses everything from roles and responsibilities to membership term, so forth. And I think is a much better guide for the committee than we have currently.
Thank you. And I will mention here that we have two general types of bylaws in town. We have zoning bylaws, and then we have what are often referred to as general bylaws. This is a general bylaw, so it does not require the 2/3 vote that I had mentioned just a few minutes ago that applies to zoning bylaws. So it only requires a majority vote in this case. Excuse me. There's about a page and a half of details in the warrant, as you can see, regarding this proposed bylaw. So, and we often do tweak wording a little bit on the floor of town meeting on proposed bylaw changes or new bylaws. So I would encourage people so that we can move our meeting along as efficiently as possible to try to review the wording of this proposal before town meeting, just in case you do find any sections that need to be clarified or grammatical errors or whatever. The wording of these bylaws is pretty important, so it's important that we get it right.
Yeah, and I think we have a couple of minor changes that we want to make since the warrant was posted.
Yeah, which can be done via amendments on the floor of town meeting.
Yep.
Okay, and then we move into Rita's other area of expertise, which is the Community Preservation Act articles. We have a combination this year of some of the more routine kind of administrative or housekeeping articles for the Community Preservation Act or the Community Preservation Committee, like Articles 15 and 16, which is just these are articles that are needed to just be able to portion the money out into the different parts of the Community Preservation Act funds, and also provide some administrative money for the committee to function. And then we have several other articles which actually talk about spending some of that money on actual projects. So Rita, again, would you want to give an overview of these? At least the new funding proposals.
You want me to talk about the projects as opposed to Articles 15 and 16?
Yeah, 15 and 16 are so routine. I don't think we need to spend time on those unless there are any questions about them that come up in the chat.
Okay. So you just want to scroll up, Becky, so I make sure I cover all of them. So the first one is the Shutesbury Historical Commission has requested $10,000, and this was for the signboard in the center of town that's on the town common. So this is a restoration of that signboard, and the process is that the Community Preservation Committee reviews applications, makes recommendations, but town meeting ultimately makes a decision about the CPA funds. And just to be clear, for those who aren't familiar with CPA, the CPA, there is a 1.5% surcharge in everybody's property tax bill every year, and the funds are held within an account. And when we make these allocations at town meeting, this is not coming from taxation per se, but it's coming from the fund, the CPA fund that has been accumulating over time. So we draw those funds, and the three categories are historic preservation, open space and recreation, and community housing. So this is a historic preservation article, this Article 17. Article 18 is is $22,000 from that open space and recreation fund balance to support the Kestrel Trust purchased the Janowitz property down at the bottom portion of dirt part of Wendell Road. And what Kestrel is planning on doing with that property, and it's already started work, is improving accessibility, working on the boardwalk. So in this case, they are improving the parking area and doing a walkway at the trailhead down there, which is open to the public. you haven't been there, I would encourage you to go down, and it's a pretty amazing property. So the $22,000 is what they're looking for from CPA funding. Article 19 is actually, we do it in two parts, just it's an accounting technicality. It's actually a total of $50,000 from the CPA account, broken down between, we have, in reserves for open space and recreation, we're drawing $22,000 and then $28,000 from our general CPA reserves to pay a portion of the acquisition of lot R15, which is a now open space parcel on Pelham Hill Road. And it's been identified by the Conservation Commission, which is also putting in some money towards this acquisition. And the Open Space and Recreation Committee as a valuable piece of property. And the plan is to, when this property is acquired also by Kestrel Trust, it will be preserved, a conservation restriction on it. And as part of the acquisition, there'll be a parking area and there'll be some trails that will be developed in this parcel. So kind of add to our trail network in Shutesbury. Article 20 is just clarifying at previous town meeting. The town meeting approved $20,000 for the community garden. And in that article, it identified the area behind town hall as to where the community garden would be located. This article asks for town meeting to approve the community garden to be located at lot 032 rather than a town hall. So it's no additional expenditure of funds, but rather just speaks to a change in location because the location was specified in the original article.
Thank you, Rita. There may be a question on Article 19 about why that money is coming from two different funds. Do you want to explain that?
Sure. If you move back up to Article 15, I think it is, if you scroll back up, Becky.
Sorry, it's taking a second.
Okay, whoops. So every year, there's, as I mentioned, there's a surcharge on the everybody's property tax because we adopted CPA. And also we get a match from the state, which I think this year, I don't remember the exact number, probably in the 30 to 35% range of that they match the funds that we raise locally. But the CPA statute requires that 10% of the funds raised through our property tax surcharge, the 10% of those funds go to each of three categories. So 10% to open space and recreation, 10% to historic resources, and 10% to community housing. And the accountant keeps those balances in those three accounts. And then whatever is not in those accounts goes to the budgeted reserve. So we have spent all but $22,000 in our open space and recreation category. And that's why we need to take the balance from our budgeted reserves. And we can do that. That is, you're allowed, you have to spend the minimum of those. You can, once that 10% goes into each of those three categories, you can only spend those funds for those three different activities. But then you can go above and beyond that and go into your budgeted reserves. And we have expended all of our 10% that we've been saving over time because we've been pretty active in open space and recreation.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, while we're scrolling backwards, Becky, backwards.
Oh, we're going up? No.
Yes, go back up. A question came in about the SUV purchases, and might as well, before we get too far away from those, maybe just go back. Actually, you probably don't even need to go back to them to answer this question, but the question basically was about if one wanted to make an amendment to make these vehicles electric, as some towns are now doing, and that would require about another $10,000 per vehicle. Is that possible to do, and how would that happen? So you can see, I'm going to, make an attempt to answer this one, but other people can chime in if they want. You can see that the vehicles we're talking about here are about $54,000 and $45,000. When the warrant is posted, as this warrant is now officially legally posted, it serves as a quote warning to voters about what will approximately be voted on at town meeting. Once we get to town meeting floor, amendments are often made, on the motions related to these articles, but there are kind of guidelines or boundaries within which those amendments can be made. When it comes to financial articles, there's no hard and fast rule, but many moderators use a 10% rule essentially, so that if you were a voter and you saw that we were going to pay $45,000 for a new fire department SUV, and suddenly you find out later on that no, they ended up paying $75,000 for this real souped up version, you might be rightfully concerned or upset about that because you weren't adequately notified about essentially what was going to happen. Town meeting ended up voting for a lot more money to be spent than what you were anticipating. So that's why a lot of moderators use a 10% rule. If a amendment is made to increase a line item by, say, that $45,000 figure by, say, $4,000, that's kind of close enough in many moderators' minds to say that's allowable. In this case, if we're talking about a $10,000 increase in both of those vehicles, that feels like it's getting outside of the boundaries that are appropriate for these kinds of motions and articles. We had this situation develop last year when someone wanted to change one of the line items by a fairly substantial amount in the budget, and I did not allow it because it just felt like it was too much of a change. So that's kind of how these things are determined. So to the person who asked that question, in this case, I think it's probably too late to make that kind of change, just assuming it would involve a like a 20% or so increase in these line items. Okay. So sorry, I can get long-winded also, but I think it's important to understand that because, there are a lot of proposals on town meeting floor to make changes that are just outside the boundaries of what is really appropriate or acceptable. Okay, so now we can move ahead and let me just make sure no other questions. Oh boy, the questions are coming in now. So I'm going to ask maybe Michael DiChiara to explain Article 21, which is a planning board zoning article. You can see that there's quite a bit of text related to this. It is a zoning bylaw change, so it would require a 2/3 vote. And Michael, if you could take a little time to explain that, then I can read through the chat questions.
Sure. And Becky, I just have a quick question for you before I jump in. Is the one that Paul that you're sharing, is that the one with the amended changes or the older one?
It's the older one. It's the one in the warrant, but I have the other one available.
Okay, it's okay. I just want to know what I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
So the planning board recommended 2 different zoning bylaws. This is the first of 2. This is the long one. The other one's extremely short. This is about energy storage, as it says, and energy storage most commonly is thought about in terms of batteries, which are a newly developing used technology across the country and in the Commonwealth, but energy storage can also be different kinds. It could be water storage, it could be kinetic. So this is more general than just batteries. And the important thing to know here is that it's considered an accessory use. So we're considering it for energy generation systems. So the energy generation systems we have in town are small and large scale solar and then small wind. Those are the 2. And so if you look at the use table on top, basically the bottom 3 would be accessory use. So the primary use would either be large scale solar, small scale solar, or small wind. And the idea is if you're generating electricity, you would have some energy storage so that when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, you could do storage. So that's what that is. The other thing I would just say in the use table in the first line, it says primary use of energy storage. The use table in the zoning bylaws basically say what the uses are allowed in town and where they're allowed. So you can see RR, rural residential, forest conservation, town center, and Lake Wyola. And then the letters are if it's allowed and if it's or not, and if it's allowed, is it special permit and who gives it. The primary use, which is that first line where you see the N, that basically means that standalone energy storage systems wouldn't be allowed in town. And this is something that's starting to occur. From our understanding, both Ashfield and Wendell were asked about having essentially battery farms with just batteries situated on site. And we're recommending that that not be allowed, but that for accessory use, that they be approved in certain areas with a special permit by the planning board. So that's sort of the high level. And then within that, there's just a lot of detail. We tried to keep it comprehensive, but also somewhat short. I think the only thing I would say, we broke out 3 different types of energy storage. 3 different kinds. So there's what we're calling on-site, which is an energy storage connected to basically a residential use or a business use or a community use, but it's use for that site. So for example, if someone has solar on their house and they have a battery connected to that, that would be on site. And so there's no special permit required for that. And you need a site plan review, but it's basically by right. The energy storage as a primary use, as I mentioned, would not be allowed. And then the third one is the C, commercial energy storage systems. And that's really where a lot of this is focused in terms of if it was a commercial enterprise. So we have currently one in town, which is the Wheelock Track Solar. That got approved, and then a couple of years after the fact, they came back and wanted to install batteries. And so the batteries got installed, but with a special permit, but there was no guidance regarding that. So the Commonwealth has got an initiative to roll out commercial battery storage and energy storage generally. And so being that this is starting to happen, we wanted to have regulations regarding it. The key thing I would mention, and the difference between when I was asking Becky if this is the old version or the new version, the version that we're looking at here is the version that came before the public hearing on May 9th. What we realized, there was some clarification that we needed to make. It was, I'm not sure, Paul, how you would want to handle this, but basically there's a whole bunch of, it's a simple change. It's changing what's currently now, it says ESS, which is energy storage system. There's a lot of these regulations starting with the safety environmental standards and going on after that, which it's just specific to the commercial energy storage system. So instead of ESS, it would be CESS. And if you go through, if you scroll down, Becky, a little bit to underneath, you see it says safety and environmental standards. And then subsequent to that, almost all of those things are just for the commercial usage. So, just as an example, we would ask a commercial operator to pay for the training of emergency response staff, or reporting in terms of what materials they're having. We wouldn't require that for an on-site residential or small business use. It's only for a commercial. So that's what the changes were. And Becky's got a copy of that. We sent it I think the night of the hearing, once the hearing was concluded, but it didn't make it in time. So it's specified and documented, but I think people, if they're reading online, if they read it closely, they say, hey, I have a battery at my house. They're really requiring me to do that. We want to make sure that they know that we're not. But how's that, Paul?
I think that's all just great. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm getting various requests, but I don't want to jump around too much. And I feel like, in fairness to the people who are kind of waiting for their questions that are coming up, we still need to move through this rather than kind of backing up and jumping back like I unfortunately did a couple times already. So the next one is 22, another zoning board article.
I can do that.
Yes, please, Michael.
Okay, so this one is short, but current events have made it complicated. So the planning board was recommending, along with the ZBA, who initially requested it, that the zoning board of appeals be expanded from a 3-person board to a 5-person board. There was also a citizen petition that was submitted asking this as well. So there was general consensus to do that. Between May 9th and a couple of days ago, the planning board was informed that the current chair of the ZBA is moving out of town, and one of the other members of the ZBA is considering resigning, which would mean that we'd have one person on the ZBA. And so we are having a meeting, the planning board and the ZBA, tomorrow night to consider if we're going to continue to recommend this, or if we're going to recommend that it get postponed or fully withdrawn. So we don't currently know what the position is. It's different from what's reflected here potentially. But that's the background behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you so much,
now,
Michael.
I'm sorry, did you?
Sorry, I was
Becky?
just thanking Michael for jumping in. Jumping on the event in the first place. I appreciate his getting here.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So now we get into some the category of administrative articles. These, again, for the most part, are fairly routine things that we have to do every year. The wording hardly ever changes on some of these. Authorizing the town to accept money from the state, that's a good thing in general for highway programs. Authorizing the treasurer to enter into compensating balance agreements that, someone may want to know what that is, but for the most part, that's very routine as well. Allowing the select board to apply for state funds and other grants and so forth. What we've been doing in the last couple of years with some of these routine articles is lumping them into something called a consent agenda, where we can just take one vote on a whole grouping of articles and be done with them. Voters have an opportunity when these consent agendas do come up to pull an individual article out of that grouping if they want to discuss it more thoroughly. So that's what we're intending to do again this year with articles 23, 4, 5, 6 is also very routine, and possibly 27. So those, again, are pretty much routine administrative articles. Okay, let me make sure I see one new message here. Let's see. Okay, sorry, we had to lose someone who couldn't wait for her question to come up. So sorry about that. The next grouping needs some explanation. This was about 15 articles that were submitted by the administrative assessor regarding various exemptions that are available to town residents. Becky, are you the one that will explain this a little bit?
I can do some explanation. I apologize. Kevin Rudin was scheduled to be here tonight and couldn't be here. He is our head assessor who made the proposals of these 15 warrant articles. If you'll just give me a second. So let me give a general explanation. And I know, so the reason they are going through 15 at a time, these are all the possible exemptions available to anyone in Shutesbury. There was concern that they could not find on a couple of them when they had, on a few of them when they had been adopted. And because of that situation, they just, Kevin decided to create a new baseline and go through all of the possible exemptions people have in town and update all of them to be sure that every single one had been voted by town meeting. So he's basically put them all on the warrant to update. I do have a general information sheet about each one, but unfortunately it doesn't have an explanation of the financial impact on the town. But what I can tell you is that these exemptions, when they're given to an applicant who deserves the exemption, the money comes from the overlay account. So for all of you who've been devouring your budgets and we're wondering what on the revenue sheet, what that overlay line is about, it's line 22 on the revenue side of the budget of this nice salmon colored budget. Our overlay has been set at about 40,000 a year. It is to cover all the exemptions given in town as well as property abatements. So if properties have a large amount of properties have to be abated, they would come out of this pot, and the balances of each year on the overlay exist until they're transferred back into the budget or into a particular use. So the money, even if we don't use the full amount, like last year we used 25,000 in the overlay, and so the balance will potentially still exist until such a time it's transferred. Anyway, moving ahead on the exemptions, for example, the blind exemption is in here. I apologize, they had it right. I had the information sheet right at my fingertips, and here it is. Okay. So the first one, Article 30, a lot of these are from Chapter 59. So what happens, these are created by the state, and then a town has to adopt them. So the purpose for Article 29, Article 30 is this will increase the whole estate limit granted to a senior surviving spouse or minor child of a deceased parent. So it will help. So when you become eligible, you have to put in your financial information to become eligible for these exemptions. And so this raises the cost of living adjustment. So there would be a higher amount that could be exempted. Article 31, the purpose is to increase the whole estate limit granted to a senior surviving spouse or a minor child of a deceased parent automatically each year by a COLA determined by Department of Revenue. Okay, Article 32. So a lot of these have very little financial impact, but to the overall town budget, but might have an impact to an individual applying for an exemption. And that's what we want to make sure they get what they should get, and that we update all of these articles. This also is similar to the last article, where it will increase the exemption granted to a senior surviving spouse or minor child of a deceased parent automatically each year by the full amount of the cost of living adjustment determined by DOT. The next article, so we're up to 33. Purpose is this will decrease the interest charged on a hardship deferral of property taxes from 8% to 3% per year. Again, it's to help the person receiving the exemption. The next article will reduce the residency requirement for veterans applying for clause 22 and 22A through 22F exemptions who were not domiciled in Massachusetts 6 months before entering the service, from 5 years to 1 year before they can apply. So again, they won't have to wait the 5 years. They can apply after 1 year. The next exemption will exempt a person otherwise eligible for clause 22 or clause 22A through 22F veterans exemptions when legal title is held by a trust, conservator, or other financial fiduciary for the person's benefit. So there are 15 of these, Paul. Do you want me to keep going? I'm happy to. We will have this as a handout, and I will put it on the website tomorrow with all the explanations.
Okay, well, thank you for asking that, because I suspect that not everybody wants to hear about every single one of these. But on the other hand, I think it would be helpful for this information to be available before people get to town meeting.
Yes.
So could that handout be made available on the website, and then we can get that word out about that?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll get it up tomorrow.
That's great. So unless I see an outpouring of hands saying, no, continue, Becky, go through all of them, I think we will move on. I don't see those hands, so, and I'm not looking very closely either for them. Okay, so that brings us up to 43. We're actually getting pretty close here. Thank you for hanging in there, everybody. This year we had 5 citizen petition articles submitted. Citizen petitions, any group of at least 10 registered voters can submit an article for the warrant for the annual town meeting. And we had 5 of those submitted. I don't know, maybe even more, but 5 of them made it onto the warrant at least this year. These are treated a little bit differently because, not only are they proposed by usually a sponsor, but there's also a whole group of at least 10 people that have signed on to this. So it's kind of a group effort, essentially. And that also means that, they can't be changed a whole lot because, you'd have to get permission of all of those people that signed on to make those changes or to withdraw them or so forth. So for the most part, they get put into the warrant as they are received. So we did have 5 of them this year. 43 is in regards to a resolution regarding Medicare for all. You can read that here. There's as resolutions typically are worded, you have a number of whereas clauses and then a therefore down near the bottom. So that therefore is basically asking the town to support a House and a Senate bill that would establish single-payer healthcare system in Massachusetts. This would direct the select board to communicate that support to our state representatives. So, did anybody want to explain that further right now? Okay, good. Article 44 is another resolution, this one in support of the Fair Share Amendment. Again, you can read through, this is information's all already posted on the website, so you can read through these. Again, this is asking the town to support the proposed Fair Share Amendment that would create additional tax of 4% on annual income of people with more than $1 million in revenue, and dedicate the money to high quality public education, affordable public colleges and universities, and to repair and maintain roads and bridges, and to safe public transportation. Pretty straightforward. You know, sometimes these resolutions get some lively debate at town meeting. We'll see what happens on these, but I think they're fairly clear, at least as stated. Okay, 45 is another citizen petition regarding outdoor lighting. This one's
Paul, I'm sorry, the version I grabbed, it didn't have this amended. So this is 45 is incomplete as written on the screen. I
right.
believe.
The version that's posted online has the complete text.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, if you're looking at the online version, you'll see that there's a lot more to it than what is shown right here on the screen. This is a petition that you know, asks for two different things really. The first is to instruct the planning board to develop a bylaw regarding light pollution and bring it back to annual town meeting a year from now for consideration and a vote. The second part is to basically enact a temporary bylaw that would largely do the same thing that could be enacted immediately, so that we don't have to wait a year or more for this to happen. There's a lot of discussion, to be frank, about this and you know, how it will be presented, and you know, whether it can be done the way it's proposed. You're just going to have to come to town meeting on to hear more discussion about that, because it's still very much in discussion right now. There was a question from the audience regarding this one, and the question was, can we vote separately on the two parts of this petition article? I can't answer that, because it really depends on how the proponent or the proponents present it, you know, what the actual motion is. And again, for those that are not familiar with this, the articles that appear in the warrant, you know, usually are fairly precise, but they're not the exact wording that is often proposed in the motion itself. The motion is what, you know, people will state on the floor town meeting. That's what we're actually going to vote on. So the article kind of generally describes what the topic is, and then the motion, you know, sets the specifics about what we're actually voting on. So until that motion is made, I don't really know, you know, what it's going to say. And therefore, I can't really answer this question, because I don't know what the motion is going to be right now. Oftentimes, we have the motions for a lot of the articles in the warrant beforehand, spelled out, and the select board usually actually makes most of these motions. When it comes to citizen petitions, they're done a little differently. I've asked that the petitioners themselves make their motion, and it's really up to them, right up till the last minute, actually, as to what they actually will move as their motion. Okay, so that's 45. 46 is an article that deals with the elementary school roof, and it basically asks for the town to approve transfer right now from free cash to a fund for the design, engineering, and replacement of the asphalt section of the Shutesbury Elementary School roof. That's, I think, fairly self-explanatory. There was discussion of this in the Finance Committee meeting a little bit earlier this evening. Does the petitioner want to say anything about this right now? I mean, not lobby for it, but just explain it at all? I don't see that that person does. So there was a question that came in about this, however. The question was basically, if all of the previous articles, including the budget, pass when we get to this point, will Article 46 be moot? And again, that's a question that I can't really answer. I mean, it'll be up to the petitioners as to whether they want to keep it in here or not. My understanding of what is likely to happen at town meeting is that, you know, or what the Finance Committee has told us is that they have committed to earmarking essentially money for the actual replacement of the roof or the repair of the roof to be done as soon as that engineering study is complete. But this article goes a little further and says, let's actually transfer the money right now. So this could still go forward, I guess, in answer to the question that came in, even if, given the fact that the Finance Committee has, you know, committed to earmarking the money in the out of our cash reserves. So that's about as much as I dare say about this right now, because it, you know, we'll have to see how it all unfolds at town meeting. Okay, that is 46, and there is one more, which is also interesting. Michael DiChiara mentioned this one earlier in regards to the planning board article that that attempts to do the same thing, and that is expand the membership of the Zoning Board of Appeals from 3 members to 5 members. So I think if, depending on what happens to that prior article, this one may or may not go forward. We'll just have to, again, see what happens on the floor of town meeting on that one. So we have just gone through the warrant. There are a couple other questions that I do want to get to. Unfortunately, the person who asked this one had to leave the meeting, but since it's being recorded, yes, it is being recorded. You know, she may still be able to hear the answer to her question. And it's kind of more of a general question. It's not about a specific article, but it basically says, if I understood correctly in the first part of the meeting, it was stated that our administrative assessor, Kevin Rudin, will be figuring out our new tax liability, which will include new valuations and assessments on property, but that won't happen until after the annual town meeting. That is a correct statement, Becky, right?
Yes, it happens in the fall.
Okay. So I think the gist of that question was, you know, just to see if we, you know, even after we vote at town meeting, people will not be able to figure out exactly what their tax liability is going to be for the new fiscal year, which is the way it always is anyway, until everything gets approved in the fall, right?
Correct. And we are dealing with a year of, again, increased sale prices. which represents increased value in homes. Last year, the total value of the town went up over $14 million. And it's anticipated it'll go up more this year, this fall, when all the revaluations are completed.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. A couple other general questions. Does the select board have the authority to create or dictate the order of the articles in the warrant? And related to that, do citizen petitions always appear towards the end of the warrant? And maybe I'll add, and if so, why?
Petitions have come at the end of the warrant, every warrant I've put together. The second question is about the select board. I always understand the select board has a role in the order. My experience has been, it's been the moderator and select board agreeing on the order. And if there's disagreement, the moderator has ruled.
Oh, that's news to me.
I shouldn't have told you.
You know, I've been under the assumption that the select board is responsible for setting up the meeting, the date, location, and putting together the warrant and posting the warrant. And then the moderator takes over at the meeting itself. So we may have to look into that one a little further. Yeah.
We have, you've done it collaboratively with the select board the years you've done it. It's worked out
Yes,
fine.
I've been pleased, you know, because I mean, especially when we've started talking about consent agendas and lumping articles. Obviously, it made sense to have those all in, you know, right following one another in the warrant. So I've been pleased that the select board was open to my suggestions on that, but I always assumed that it was ultimately their, you know, their authority to, you know, to decide how it was going to be. So. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I think we did address that.
Paul, there's somebody waving their hand.
Oh, that would be Grace.
It is Grace.
That's
Okay.
our town clerk. And Grace, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and then you may speak.
I just wanted to say, yes, the select board is in charge of arranging the order of the warrants. And if there is conflict on the select board's part, obviously it is up to the moderator, given the moderator's authority over town meeting. But yeah, in terms of the warrant, and the moderator can decide at town meeting to change things around as is needed, right? But in terms of what's on the warrant, that authority in terms of the order is, yes, up to the select board.
Thank you. I will say, you know, there was some inquiries to me earlier this spring about changing the order of articles at town meeting. There are several motions that can be made that would essentially do that. You can move to table an article. You can actually move to advance an article, you know, but for the most part, and I've been in touch with a number of other moderators around the state about these questions. They're generally discouraged. Sometimes they're actually considered to be out of order, because the basic assumption is that, you know, this is a select board's responsibility. It's their authority to set the warrant the way they choose to. And presumably they have good reason for setting the order the way they do. So to change that requires some pretty good justification and pretty good reasoning. And, you know, most moderators are open to that if a good case is presented, but they tend to discourage it, you know, in the absence of those good reasons. Okay, there's one other question, and we're getting close to 9 o'clock, so it'd be great if we can wrap up here in the next few minutes. I may need some further clarification on this one. The question is, does a town vote for appropriation that affects the budget I don't, is it allowed procedurally? Could that person who sent that in just send me another quick note to clarify that? I'm not sure I'm understanding the gist of the question. And while we're waiting for that, I think, oh yeah, no, there was one other question that came in earlier. I'm sorry that I did miss, and that was, oh no, we did address that one. So I will ask select board members, Becky, Grace, other town officials, are there any other warrant related questions or any other information you'd like to convey? No. Okay. And I'm not seeing anything. Oh, here we go. All right, so the Grace, I'm sorry, are you muted again? Okay, sorry about that. I thought you were waving goodnight. Okay,
Sorry.
you're on.
All I want to say, given this opportunity, is election polls. That means to vote on candidates. That opens at 8 o'clock on Saturday. Town meeting opens at 9 o'clock on Saturday. Town meeting is where you vote on warrant articles. If anyone is sick, or gets sick in the next few days, you can still apply for absentee voting. Just call me at my office. You can find my office information on the town website. I know that a lot of people are going through that right now, so I want to put that out there.
Okay, thank you. And I got some clarification on that final question. Basically, it is asking, can a town vote change the FinCom budget that they've already voted on and approved? I could answer that, but I'd rather someone else. Becky, do you want to answer that one?
Can a town meeting vote change the budget after it's already been voted and approved?
Presumably approved by the FinCom. And no, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to allow the person who asked that question to speak and tell us exactly what she's asking.
Sorry.
Gail, you're
After
on.
spending X hours going through line by line on the budget that the FinCom has presented, and the town votes on it, can then a town vote be called as for an appropriation or a change to that budget after the fact? Is that citizen petition even allowable in terms of a procedure?
I see. Citizen petition specifically is what you're
Yeah.
asking about.
But,
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Becky.
Gail, the petition is asking for a transfer of free cash. It's only a transfer. It's not part of the whole budget.
But it affects the budget, does it not? No, it has no effect.
It does not affect the budget. It eliminates our free cash. I mean, it doesn't
Okay.
affect the budget, but it greatly reduces the free cash, but it's not related to the budget.
And it doesn't contravene what the town has already approved then.
So, right, the budget is not impacted, and the other articles that are being approved say, you know, transfers of other free cash. It would just,
Okay.
it has it spends more money.
The answer is it has no effect.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
No effect on the budget that the finance committee presented. Certainly has an effect on town finances.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yes. And
Right.
George in his hand.
Yes, George, whoops.
Did you
You
throw
just-
him out?
You just disappeared.
No.
Oh, he's resilient.
Okay, there you are. You keep moving around on me.
I always lower my hand after I've been acknowledged, and I just lowered it too soon. So the only thing I wanted to say, I think, there is Gail's leading to one important point, and that is when the finance committee sat down to determine how best to finance all our fixed asset purchases, all these capital requests, we view it at a macro level. We tied all the pieces together, trying to figure out the right way to fund each one, but that led us to a few important goals. Number one, making sure we had adequate reserves for future purchases. Somebody asked the question earlier in the finance committee portion, how do we know that we can handle the things in the future? Well, one of the reasons is we keep adequate reserves, of which free cash is one of them. The other goal was to minimize tax increases, not only this year, but looking into the future. So we have this comprehensive plan, and all these warrant articles being passed fit into that plan, all the capital warrant articles. This particular warrant article number 45, it doesn't tie into that at all. And in fact, it undermines what we're doing. And we have a plan for the roof. We think it's a good plan, and it fits in with all the other things we've done. It takes advantage of the American Rescue Plan. And so this can be passed, if the citizens want to pass it, but it really is not consistent with what we've done. And when we get to the school roof special town meeting, we'll have to reevaluate the finance committee on how we're going to finance it. And the other thing I'd like to say is one of our plan to fund the school roof is to use $250,000 of free cash. So this is saying I forget the number, 700 or 750. Well, we're already taking 250 of it. The finance committee is planning on using that, but using more than that doesn't really fit into this big puzzle that we have that sets us up for future purchases.
Thank you, George. And I just want to follow up with the reminder, when George talks about what the Finance Committee is planning to do, it's really what the Finance Committee is proposing to voters to do. So ultimately, as I say every year, the voters of the town have the final say on all kinds of matters, including the budget and including how we use our cash reserves and so forth. I think people oftentimes, take the advice of the Finance Committee to heart because, they know so much more than most of the rest of us do and so forth, and they work so hard on this. But ultimately, it is a decision of the voters about, matters such as this. So, and with that, I'd like to wrap up here. We've gone on, for a long time this evening. I think we've had a lot of great information shared. Again, I appreciate all the town officials and committee members that have shown up and hung out with us all evening, all the voters who have shown up as well. And I look forward to seeing you all on Saturday when we can really make some final decisions about a lot of these matters. So thank you all very much, and good night.
Good night, Paul. You are the host, so you can shut down the meeting, sir.
Okay, do I need to do anything about the recording? Just stop the recording, or do you need to save that somehow or anything?
It'll be fine. We just leave the meeting and then the recording will be sent.
Okay, all right. Well, I am
Oh,
about
that's
to.
good. They all jumped.
All right, thank you, Becky.
Oh, excellent job. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Okay,
Good
good night.